Hello, Internet. I am Pastor Recoil, and welcome to my parish. Today is the fourth Sunday after Epiphany, and we're going to talk about it. Welcome to Pastor Recoil's Parish, where I talk about some things in the Bible that you may not have heard about in church, either because it's not quite appropriate for all audiences, or it just isn't something that's easy to talk about in a sermon. Today's readings for the fourth Sunday after Epiphany are Jeremiah 1, 4 through 10 and 17 through 19, Psalm 71, 1 Corinthians 12, the second half of 31, to chapter 13, verse 13, and Luke 4, 31 through 34. Usually, I like to pull together all four readings, or at least most of them, and get all of the various points together to see what they're trying to say. I'm not doing that this week, though, and instead I'm focusing on 1 Corinthians 13, both because it's super important and really quite misunderstood. If you've ever been to a Christian or Christian-adjacent wedding, you've probably heard 1 Corinthians 13, or at least a part of it. It's a lovely and wonderfully flowery passage about how great and wonderful love is. Why it's read at so very many weddings. And you'd think then that 1 Corinthians, the whole letter, would be about love and family and marriage and things like that. And if you thought that, you would be wrong. 1 Corinthians has Paul the Apostle writing to a church with a whole heap of problems. They're incredibly factionalized, with some people saying that they follow one person and other people saying they follow somebody else. They're incredibly divided by income, as the rich and poor basically function as two completely separate churches, even to the point that they won't even share a meal together. And when they do have their church service, it is pure and utter chaos, with everyone more concerned with looking good and being the center of attention than they are focused on worshiping God. Actually, that sounds kind of familiar. Right now, there are an incredible number of different Christian denominations in the United States alone, and even more of them worldwide. We all claim to follow Jesus, but we also all claim to follow someone else. For instance, I'm a Lutheran pastor, which means I am steeped in the tradition established by Martin Luther in the 16th century in Germany. But I'm also part of a smaller subset of Lutherans who differentiate themselves from other Lutherans in a number of specific ways. And even within that subset of Lutherans, there are a number of other less formal divisions. There's also great divides within churches based on income, class, and race as well. It's rare to come across a church that are diverse in any of these ways. Most churches tend to be attended by people who are quite similar to one another. And the church I'm currently serving really isn't all that different. And then there's that last bit about everyone wanting to look good and be the center of attention. We all kind of know how that goes. If you ever heard the phrase, put on your Sunday best. A lot of pastors out there too just seem like they like to hear themselves talk and like the celebrity of being a pastor, making the show more important than the message. And I think the problem there basically all boils down to the same sort of thing, whether it's the church in America today or the church in Corinth in the first century. Christians have forgotten how to love one another. Now, this isn't a uniquely American problem. It's not a uniquely Christian problem, but it's especially disappointing for people who claim to follow Jesus, because Christianity is supposed to be a religion built on the idea that because of love, Jesus, who is God, became human, suffered, and died for humans, so that God could suffer with those who are suffering and to create a liberated community of love, so that they too could bring that same loving liberation to others. Now, that is a pretty simplistic explanation of what the incarnation was all about, but I think it's the basics. Christians are supposed to emulate the kind of God who would put aside all of the God stuff so that humans could have a better life. Not just in some vague eternity, but right now. And then that same God invites humans to work out that bettering of life right now with love. But we don't do that. Instead of loving others, putting the well-being of others ahead of our own, we act selfishly. We step on others to better our own position. We focus on being right so much that we drive people away, both from ourselves and from the God who we claim to follow. We spend a lot of time figuring out if something should or shouldn't be done, and by the time we make a decision, we've already missed the opportunity to love. And I think that's exactly what 1 Corinthians 13 is speaking into. Paul says, you can speak the most beautiful language in heaven or on earth, but without love, you're just slamming sheet metal together. You can be the wisest person in all the land and have so much faith that you can tell a mountain to pick up and move. But if you don't love, not anything. You can give everything you have away to the poor, and you can even die for what you think is right. But if you don't do that out of love, it's worthless. Instead, Paul says, live a life of love. Have the kind of love that is patient and kind, that doesn't get jealous or brag, that isn't arrogant or rude. Love in such a way that you don't serve yourself. And love in a way that hates injustice. See, the point of 1 Corinthians 13 is saying that it doesn't matter if you believe all the right things, if you do everything right, if you are the most gifted and talented person in all the world. It doesn't even matter if you do everything that people expect you to do. Love isn't behind it. It doesn't matter. And that brings up an important question. Is it better to get something wrong and show love for someone else than to get everything right and be selfish? See, as a Christian, I'd say it's better to be wrong and show love than be right and not show love. As a Christian, I'd get a different kind of specific. It's better to have a wrong doctrine or a wrong belief and share the love of God than to have a perfect belief and push people away from a loving God. For me, I'd rather love others like I have been loved by God than make sure I have everything right and make people think that God hates them. So if you want to see more content like this, check out the links to my right, or click the logo just below my face to subscribe so you'll know when my next video comes out. Thank you for watching, and take the time this week to love your neighbor as yourself, especially if you don't like them all that much.